Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today to learn about all the great new stuff in Capture One 12. My name's David and joining me is Tina.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Tina is a photographer.
I am an editorial and commercial beauty photographer. So for those of you who don't know what that means, if you go makeup shopping, for example, in shops like Sephora, there would be images of mine in there.
Okay.
Brands like Max Factor, so that's the commercial side of it. But I'm more known for the editorial stuff, so the more crazy out there images, and that's what we're going to be using today, isn't it? So,
these are your images we're using.
So a little bit more out there, you know, when I do play days, that's sort of like living my best creative life on those images.
Excellent. Well, let's dig into what's new. Yeah. The first thing, I guess the most obvious, is the new interface.
Yes, it looks beautiful now.
Yeah, it looks, much better, bigger icons. So if you're doing long editing sessions, then, less fatigue. So for example, we have a new modern flat style interface, as you can see with me on the screen right now. All the tools you know and love are still there, so you'll be able to have the same familiarity. It would just be better for you in longer editing sessions because the icons are a little bit bigger. We've also changed the design of these icons over here just to reflect better what's in the content of those tool tabs. So for experienced users like me and Tina, maybe it doesn't matter so much, but for the new users, of course, it's a lot more intuitive and easy to get started. Also, to help the new users, and probably even the more experienced ones like myself and Tina, is that we've rearranged all the menu systems that you see here. So as Capture One has grown over the years, we've added obviously more features and things and functionality. And like my sort of crazy, out of control junk drawer at home, this kind of, expands and grows and so on, and it's harder to find things and so on. So like pulling out all that stuff out my junk drawer, we've done that with all the menu system and rearranged everything so it's just easier to find.
That looks a lot cleaner already.
Yeah, so there might be things in there that you never knew existed, and now you can
find them till now, but now
exactly. So for example, like the view menu here, there are just simple options like hide and show the viewer and then customize, whereas before it was this kind of long list, which was just much harder to navigate your way through. Also, I don't know if you do, but I use Mac and PC, and there were some subtle differences between the two platforms. So of course, if you're working somewhere which is all PC based, and then you go and pick up your Mac, then it's different, and that's also not a nice experience. So now the two, if you like, the brother and sister, Mac and PC, are aligned, so the experience is the same.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, so it's easier to pick up for the people who want to start using Capture One and experience all the great new stuff. But also, as I said, that might give rise to things that you never knew were there in the first place. So that's the first thing. So secondly, and now we're going to use one of your great images, and this is definitely one of my, if you like, fantastic new features. And you know a little bit about Capture One 12.
Yeah, I read about it. I can't wait to see it in action. But super excited.
And we gave you a little rundown, but you haven't really seen the power of what it can do. So, layers have always been a big feature in Capture One, if you like. You're way more experienced in Photoshop than me, but I guess we can say Capture One has a kind of layer-like approach like Photoshop does. So instead of having adjustment brushes, for example, we can make layers and then do edits on those individual layers. This is really powerful to do on the raw file. Of course, Photoshop has, I guess, more capabilities, but gradually we've been adding more and more, so you can do more on the raw file stage to save you time.
Yeah, and I do that. I mean, all of my color work now is done in Capture One in layers.
Great.
And yeah, so it's, I mean, a lot of people aren't even aware that they exist, but that kind of like saves my life, you know, those having the control to brush things in where I need it.
Exactly. And what, why do it in Capture One? Just because it's...
I do that just because I shoot sets a lot and I just want to see them in front of me and want to see that they, that they match each other, that they work, as I said, that the settings are the same from picture to picture. And it's just, like batch process, really.
Yeah.
Especially if you work with clients, I want to have the ability to show them the image as close to the finished image as possible.
Right.
So I have to do all of my stuff like right there and then.
I guess they don't have time to sit with you and
I can't
work on 25 images on a shoot in
Exactly.
Photoshop one by one. Great. So to expand this even further, Capture One 11, we added sort of feathering masks, refine masks, other great stuff for working with layers. But now we have the ability to create a mask based on luminosity. If you don't know what luminosity means, that's basically the lightness values in a picture. So anything from shadows all the way up to highlights, we can really sort of restrict where we want to apply our adjustment. So on your image here, Tina, first thing we're going to do is just add a new filled layer. So that looks white right now because that's our grayscale mask, but I'll just press M, turn the mask on and off. So that looks like just a mask over the whole image. But now we want to restrict that mask to just certain areas. So rather than brushing on by hand, which works great, of course, but to save time and to create complex masks quickly, and I don't necessarily like to use the word complex because maybe that sounds intimidating, but complex masks can obviously do lots of great things to the image, but you don't necessarily have the time to create them by hand. So if I click on this new button here, Luma Range, this brings up this nice little simple tool, which basically allows us to shape the mask to certain lightness values. So just a quick example, if I just bring this one all the way down to the bottom, then you see the mask has disappeared like on her skin, which is sort of a mid-tone to highlight, and now we're just restricted to the shadows.
Yeah. Capture One is doing the complex bit for you.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Couldn't have said it better myself. Capture One's doing the complex bit for you, because to create that manually would be very difficult. So let's just apply that. And now, if we just do something really simple, I'll just drag in the shadow point of the levels, and that will just darken off all those, deepest blacks. That's just a really simple example, but it could be, to apply noise reduction in certain areas, sharpening in certain areas. We won't look at it today, of course, but the skin tone is generally mid-tone, I guess. Yeah. So if we just did a mid-tone luminosity mask, we could then use our skin tone tool to even out colors, change the color of the skin, do some sharpening or softening or whatever. It's just fantastic to be able to do that so quickly and create those masks without having to do it manually.
Yeah, just a lot more control really, isn't it? Because I mean, levels I use all the time, but to now be able to control exactly in which area it goes.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
And even though we have some tools that already have, a restriction to certain areas, like the color balance tool has the ability to work on just shadows, midtones and highlights, but then that's a range we've set. It's not a range that you've set.
Yeah.
So of course you can personalize those things with a Luma range and use any other tool as well. So it's much more extensive than anything you've been able to do in the past. And right now we're only really sort of scratching the surface of what's possible. I've been using it for a few months. You've had a very quick introduction now, but the potential of what you can do with this is really fantastic.
Yeah. And again, I mean, a tool like this, if you're not a beauty photographer like I am, I feel like this is universal and this is exciting for any kind of genre.
Yeah,
right?
I've been testing it on, landscape images, people images, street photography, anything really is useful for this tool, because I can always think of a situation where, okay, the highlights of my image, I'd like to darken them a bit, or I want to bring out some more clarity in the clouds or something like that. And often you think, can I really be bothered to hand draw a mask? I can just click, click, set automatically, and then bring my adjustment in. For you, I can think of like skin masking, changing, density of shadows and highlights and all that kind of stuff.
So question for you then. That mask that you just said there, if I would want to, for example, do this adjustment only on her and not on the background or exclude the eyes, I could just go in and erase
exactly. So it's just a mask like any other mask. So if we turn it back on again and we think, okay, I actually don't want it on the eyes, but it looks great everywhere else, I could just take my erase mask and then let's just make this a little smaller, and then I could just remove it from that point. But the awesome thing is that if I brush a mask back in, it's always respecting that range that we set. So if I just brush randomly here, sort of really messy, then the mask is only going back onto that Luma range, which is even more exciting as well.
That is exciting.
And again, if I just wanted to remove like the top corner, we could just take out, you know, that, no problem at all. Brush it back in, simple. Always respecting that range as well. Another thing you're going to find exciting, because I do, is, okay, this is one of a sequence of shots, correct?
Yes, now we're talking. Because what do I do if I like what I've done and want to put it onto every single image in my set?
Exactly. Now, to do this by hand, of course, you'd have to go through each individual image and try and mimic what you've done. Like, oh, I just want to isolate the shadows, as we've done here. But in this case, that would take a while because you might have 50 shots in a sequence, I guess. Or like how many looks you shoot in a day and you want to apply your sort of adjustments and style. That's, again, painstaking to do that one by one. So what we can do here, like any other sort of tool in Capture One, is copy something from one image to another. And in this case, in the Layers tool, I can just shift-click up here. And what we're going to do is copy basically that Luma range from that image to the others, but it's now unique to those images. So it's taken exactly the same Luma range and applied it to those shots. So even if your subject is moving around, which is going to happen in your line of work, you can't tell them to sit still and you don't want them to sit still. This is a great way to get the same masking, the same edits across to a whole bunch of images that are not static.
I think that's super exciting. So it doesn't actually copy over the shape of the mask.
Exactly.
Range,
so, so
amazing.
Not the shape of the mask, that's a great way to put it, the actual range which creates that mask individually for the images. So sticking with masking, let's pick one of your other images. Let's go with this one here. Let's choose that. Okay, so in the past, or a popular tool, I guess, has always been the vignetting tool in Capture One, which allows you to just put a basic vignette around the, I guess, edges of the image.
Which is pretty, but it's restricted.
It's restricted. There's no control. It's either around the edges or nothing, which works for some images, not for everything. So also in the Layers tool, if we go here, we can see two new options, Linear Gradient Mask and Radial Gradient Mask. Similar, but one's a circle, one's straight. So let's look at the circle first. So where I start drawing, that's just going to give me this nice sort of circle shape, which I can move around. These little dots, we can change the size, we can change the fall off and so on. And what's more, we can also sort of rotate. So really any kind of radial shape we can make on an image with the maximum flexibility. So now if we come off that, let's just hide my mask. Then if we wanted to darken those areas, we can do so. And if you're not happy with that, of course, there's nothing to stop us going back in and then just adjusting slightly. So way more flexible than the past, with none of those restrictions of that previous vignetting tool. And I'm sure you can think of uses for this as well.
Because as we said, it was only in the corners before, but some of us are not being restricted to square images.
No, exactly. And in this case, you know, we've got maybe a bit more in the bottom third of the image that we want to work with and so on.
She's not straight, so you kind of want this at an angle, and you can do that now.
Exactly. So similar to that, so that's the radial mask, if you like. We've now got the linear gradient mask. So let's switch to another image. Let's take this one.
So I have been using the gradient tool in the past. So how is this different?
So it's a little bit different in that it sort of does the same job, but again, a lot more flexibility. So if we just, let's say we wanted to brighten up the bottom half of this image. So I'll just draw a simple sort of gradient like that. So we can see the gradient there. Now before that was, if you like, the limit to it, that is it, that is it. But you see we've got these three lines which sort of indicate how the fall off works. But if I want to, I can obviously have a very hard fall off or a very gradual fall off. But the cool thing is that you can make it asymmetric, which sounds fancy, but it basically means that either side of that center line, if I just do a quick alt click, I can create this non-parallel mask, if you like. So we can be a lot more specific, again, like the radial mask being more powerful than the previous vignetting tool. This gradient mask is a lot more flexible and really gives you the control to put the exact mask on that you want.
That's actually really exciting.
So now if you wanted to, let's just, you know.
Like most of the time, like in this image, the light is not quite as even on the face as it is on the body, or sometimes people that do portrait photography, the hands are, you know, a little bit brighter or in a different color than the rest of the body. So this tool would be super helpful for sorting that out. Like you can see there, the shadow is a little bit
can just
dark
brighten that up a little bit. Exactly. Now to kind of make those two tools even more exciting and more useful, more powerful, if we combine what we did before, you can see where I'm going, with the Luma masking range, we can add exactly the same thing to these radial masks or gradient masks, or linear masks, I should say. So if I click the Luma range button on this one, let's look at our grayscale view. So that shows us exactly what the mask looks like. So white areas are the masked areas. But let's restrict it further with our Luma range. So let's say if we look at the image itself, we kind of like the fall off here, but we actually don't want it to affect her shoulder. So let's look at our grayscale. We turn on Luma range. And now if I just restrict this a little bit, we can say, leave the sort of skin areas alone. And just adjusting the sliders, I can get a nice sort of soft mask like so. So it's just, if you like, in the bottom left-hand corner. Didn't take very long, nice and quick. I can apply that. And even you can see already, like it makes a big difference if we just do some dramatic adjustments. We've now restricted it further just to that part. So even if a gradient mask doesn't do the job, then you think, actually it's going to work great now if I just quickly apply that Luma range. And that didn't take very long to do.
Quickly is the word here.
Quickly is the word, definitely.
Everything is just sped up and people's lives are just made so much easier.
Yeah. And if I'm honest, I haven't been practicing on these images. This is just stuff we're trying out, and you can see how quick it is to get the result without having to mess around for ages and ages. So combining those two together, again, think of the possibilities. We're really only just sort of scratching the surface of what we can do with Luma range masking, adding those other tools as well, being able to brush in a range and remove a range and so on. Again, to give you a bit more flexibility, what we can actually do even more. So right now we have the mask that looks like this. But if I want to edit that mask without the constraint of the Luma range, we added just a little extra feature called rasterize. So that would just lock the mask down as it is. So now I can add, remove, just erase this little bit here, for example, without any of those restrictions of the Luma range. So you get the best of both worlds, especially if there was some area up here that, was the same luminosity, then we could just get rid of that and so on, without being restricted to that. Sounds good?
That sounds super exciting. I am going to be all over that feature.
Definitely. It's going to save you time.
Yeah.
It's going to give you better image quality because you're working on the raw files. You'll be able to do those batch operations. That's really simple to do. So again, it's not just about image quality, it's working faster, and maintaining quality, not having to sacrifice some aspect of image quality, which you never want to do, I guess, in favor of, working quickly or whatever. So you get the good image quality and being able to work quickly as well. Still doesn't end there.
Ooh, there's more.
There's more. So now replaced in the edit menu, like we said at the start, we've rearranged these. So edit keyboard shortcuts or using keyboard shortcuts in Capture One is, again, a super good feature for working quickly. Now, there's a lot of shortcuts in Capture One. I don't know them all. Maybe you know them all.
But I don't think I do. I mean, that's like, everyone, whatever they prefer. What's yours?
Exactly. Well, I love sort of just tapping the key here. This is the key under the escape key. So I just tap this backwards and forwards like so to hide my viewer. Something simple like that saves a whole bunch of time because I don't have to browse up to view, go down to here and change it and so on.
Or color tags.
Color tags, that's very common to do on shortcuts, just be able to whiz through images quickly with the cursor keys and apply different colors to arrange them and so on. Now there's lots of shortcuts, of course, and it has been a little tricky to find those shortcuts.
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
I love my shortcuts, but I can never find them.
Yeah, like, you know, I'd love to be able to shortcut, let's see, processing. So if I type in process in this new shortcut bar, then it shows me anything related to process. So now I know that down here, Command D, that allows me to process an image and so on. Or we were talking about layers and masking. So if I type in layer here, for example, we can see all the stuff that you can do with layers. So adding layers, adding field layers and so on, turning layers on and off. Now before, you would have had to know where to look.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you're not motivated to do that, let's face it, who is, to dig through those kind of menus, then it was harder to set up shortcuts to help your workflow. Now it's much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also now in the edit menu, which is where it should have been in the first place. Yeah.
And obviously you can use this area to customize your preferences. So if you, for example, don't like D to be your processing key,
could be anything else.
Change it to anything you want. Really.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
and if you're used to shortcuts from Photoshop or whatever, which you want to use in Capture One, so you don't have to learn 2 sets of shortcuts, then it's nice that you can just align them with your other applications too.
And you can reverse look them up as well, can't you? So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can see, for example, what is assigned to.
Yeah, so if I wanted to know, hang on a minute, what does, something's been happening in Capture One, like O. Okay, O means open or change the layer opacity. Oh, that's why my layer opacity was changing without me knowing, because I was hitting O or whatever. So.
Very handy.
Very handy. Okay, so now we're going to look at an image which is not from you.
That's okay.
There's more than one photographer in the world. So from Jonas Rask. And the reason why I've got this image up, because it was shot on a Fuji camera. Now, something that Fujifilm has done really successfully is to put styles in camera, which I guess mimic or simulate Fujifilms of old. So if you're old as me and you remember this stuff called film, and you had a warm appreciation of...
No one's as old as you.
I know, terrible. But if you remember film, you might have this warm appreciation for, let's say, Astia or something in... when you were using film in your Fuji camera. So what Fuji successfully did was to actually put these film simulations in camera, and they actually look really good. So people are of course very happy to use those, but also a bit sad that it didn't necessarily translate in a nice way across to the RAW converter that you were using. So the goal is now that I can find any image, let's say we want to have, you know, Astia, I can choose it here and it will look very close to how it looks on the camera too. So the experience is going to be the same. So I can shoot RAW and I can apply my film simulations in Capture One. And if I decide, you know what, I don't think Astia was the right choice, let's go to Classic Chrome.
That looks so cool.
Yeah, it's perfect. And Fuji, as I said, did a really nice job of this. It was quite a task to translate this from how the camera does this to how Capture One does it, as you can imagine. But it's looking really fantastic. So if you are a Fujifilm user, because we have this partnership with Fuji, there's a special Capture One Pro Fujifilm and an Express version where these will be included for Capture One 12. There's still more. So let's go to Preferences, and there's a new tab at the end called Plugins.
Yeah, no, you go.
Don't you know what they are? No.
Please tell me.
So the whole purpose of plugins is to really open up the infrastructure of Capture One, if you like. So I don't know if you do, but there's plenty of photographers who export their work to like sharing sites, portfolio sites, for selecting and so on, or just displaying your work or creating a website and so on.
I do, but it's a lot of work, so
less motivated, So of course, if you can't do that directly from Capture One, there's always a middle step. So I have to export to my format, whatever that is, and then export to my published state, or round trip to another application. There's always, if you like, that middle step. So it's much better if Capture One could or can interact directly with these publishing services and so on. So we've opened that up. There's an SDK which developers can use and then create plugins. And so cutting out that middle step saves you time, but it also means you can optimize the settings. So I might not know what is the correct settings to go to a particular hosting service, but of course within that plugin infrastructure, then that could be something that helps you. So how do you know how many pixels dimensions it should be? Do I need to do some extra sharpening, or what color profile should it be? All of those choices, which are many of course, can be then helped by having the correct plugin.
Perfect.
So developers out there, of course, are now welcome to approach us and start making great plugins which benefit, of course, their customers using Capture One, and our customers using Capture One using their services. And last but not least, like any Capture One update or release, we add support for new cameras and lenses. So now there's more than 500 cameras that are supported by Capture One. Of course, we always go through a great process of making sure that the color is good for any camera we support, sharpness, noise reduction, all that kind of stuff. So interestingly, like the images we looked at today had very few adjustments on them.
I'm going to say none. That's
Great.
straight out of camera.
So straight out of camera, which is what you want, because you don't want to go through the boring process of fixing bad color or deciding on what sharpening is best, because we've done that for you.
Just wanted to look that nice straight out of the box.
Exactly. So then you can
get
creating, add your color grade and Luma masking, as we saw
from
earlier.
now on.
So if you haven't tried Capture One before, don't forget you can go ahead to phaseone.com and download a 30-day trial, fully functional. You can try out all the features that you saw today, and of course all the existing features as well. And of course, if you're an existing Capture One user, same applies for you. Go ahead, try out the new features and see what you think. So thanks for joining us today, and thanks Tina.
Thank you for having me. That was
very
great
welcome.
Fun.
And hope to see you all soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.